The unsurpassed, penetrating, and perfect truth is seldom met with, even in 100,000 myriad kalpas. Now we can see and hear it. We can remember and accept it. I vow to make the Buddha's truth one with myself. Homage to the Buddha, homage to the Dharma, homage to the Sangha. So thank you all for being here today to join us in honoring those who have died in war or in military service. According to the all-knowing one, Google that is, we observe a federal holiday on Memorial Day in order to remember those who have died in military service of our country, and that's the official meaning of the holiday. My personal practice is to offer merit to people who have died in military service and also to all beings, human and other, who have died as a result of war. And what I'm going to say next implies no disrespect for those who serve in the military. It simply expresses a personal opinion that has changed over time. When I was younger, I considered myself a pacifist. And in my teens and 20s, I acted on this by participating in anti-war protests, most of which, by the way, ended up in terrific outdoor concerts. Although I held the views of a pacifist, war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. My own heart was not at peace. In fact, I myself was working hard at making war on reality, on the truth. Years later, I met Reverend Master Jiyu and learned the practice of meditation and other Buddhist teachings. One of the first scriptures I encountered, and still one of the most important to me, was Great Master Dogen's Rules for Meditation, which instructs us to think of neither good nor evil, consider neither right nor wrong. As in war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. This leads into the topic for this talk, which is something I'm not proud of being an expert on, but I am from experience, and that's complaint and criticism. I don't know whether any of you have problems with this, but for me, it's always been a big one. And I suspect it may be a problem for others as well. My first step in this effort to convert the complaining mind has been to notice, accept, and let it go when it arises. I've long known myself to be habitually inclined toward the dark side, if you will, the sort of negative side, but it's still a surprise to see the extent of this inclination in myself. One recent day I was sitting in the dining hall, taking a mid-morning refreshment break, and a thought of contentment arose. How nice it is to be able to take a few minutes break on a busy morning. And this was followed immediately by the perception that my drink was only warm, not hot as it should have been. Recognizing now the complaining mind and attempting to convert it, the next thought was to criticize myself for complaining. Now, it was not only that the drink wasn't hot, it was also that the monk was a pitiful example of Buddhist practice. Carrying this to the extreme may be the worst monk ever. With many years of practice behind me, I can say with confidence that self-criticism does not help convert the complaining mind. It's just, well, criticism, another complaint. So what's the problem with complaining? The dictionary defines to complain as to express grief, pain, or discontent, and criticism as the act of making judgments and the act of finding fault, a function of the judgmental mind. From an early age, I've developed the ability to find fault. Starting in 1950, when we traded our beloved 1937 Buick for a new 1950 Pontiac, which I did not approve of, and in the same year when we decided to replace me as the center of the universe with a new baby. So, since then, I've been full of complaints and criticism. The underlying delusion was that the ability to find fault and criticize marked me as somehow intelligent, too savvy to blindly follow the cheerful party line. And on a bit less selfish level, if I pointed out the faults in someone or something, couldn't it or they improve? Couldn't they be stopped from irritating or possibly even harming someone else? The problem is that complaining and criticism are expressions of greed, hatred, and delusion. I complain when I want something to be different, greed. When I dislike things the way they are, anger. And when I think that complaining will somehow help, delusion. So, what to do about this? I looked without much success for references in the Buddha's teachings to complaining. And with the help of some fellow monks, I was able to find a couple of things. There's a story in the Dhammapada that deals with a complaining monk. He had become a monk in his old age, and for that reason he was often mistaken for a senior monk and treated as one. And here's his story. I didn't bring the book because the book is very large, so I copied the page. So it's titled, Retaliation Does Not Lead to Peace. The old man who retaliated, and his name was Tissa. Tissa, a cousin of the Buddha, had become a bhikkhu, a monk, only in his old age. He liked to pose as a senior bhikkhu and was very pleased when visiting bhikkhus asked his permission to do some service for him. On the other hand, he failed to pay due respect to the senior bhikkhus. Besides, he often quarreled with the younger bhikkhus. Should anyone rebuke him on account of his behavior, he would go complaining to the Buddha, weeping, very much dissatisfied and very upset. The Buddha, who understood the position, advised Tissa to change his behavior and not to harbor thoughts of hatred against anyone, for hatred could only be eradicated by not harboring hatred. And the verses in the Dhammapada relating to this are, he abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who harbor such thoughts, hatred is not appeased. He abused me, he beat me, he defeated me, he robbed me. In those who do not harbor such thoughts, hatred is appeased. So those are verses 3 and 4 in the Dhammapada. Complaining, even quietly to oneself, about other people, doesn't promote our bodhisattva vow to help all beings, and it doesn't help our day-to-day interactions with those around us. People don't have to beat or abuse me before I find myself complaining about them. All they have to do is, for example, slurp their food and drink, slam the door shut, shuffle their feet, wear the wrong clothes, or any of countless trivial things. To complain about circumstances is, in effect, to conduct an argument with the truth. In Buddhism, we value seeing things as they really are. But what if they really are a cancer diagnosis, war, or social injustice? Great Master Dogen's commentary on the precept on defaming the three treasures instructs us not to criticize, to accept everything. seeing things as they really are is a function of wisdom. As the scripture says, deepest wisdom of the heart that is beyond discriminative thought. I may judge war to be wrong, for example. And this thought is still a product of the judgmental mind, no matter how closely I cherish this opinion. In the larger scope of things, there could be a reason for warfare and bloodshed that is beyond my understanding. I could be wrong. One of the most valuable teachings Reverend Master Jiyu passed on to me. So, what makes me able to say what is wrong? What I can do is to consider consequences and decide what is good for me to do, rather than what is good for somebody else to do. And I noticed in the invocation that we sang this morning, the general going before the Buddha and asking about warfare, bloodshed, and strife. And the Buddha said, those who go to war must consider the consequences. And those who protest war also must consider the consequences. Another problem with complaining is that the pain and discontent expressed in complaints are contagious. There's technology these days that allows us to observe the brain with imaging. And experiments have shown that the brains of humans and other animals have cells called motor neurons. Mirror neurons. I get my word mixed up there. One experiment with two groups of people demonstrated how they work. One group was touched lightly on the leg with a feather. Another group watched a video of someone being touched on the same spot with a feather. And the same area of the brain was activated in both groups, being touched and simply seeing a video of someone being touched. Another experiment had people looking at photos of happy people and of angry people. And the same facial muscles used to make angry faces were activated in those looking at photos of angry faces, and likewise for happy faces. You may have noticed your own response when somebody approaches you in a grumpy frame of mind or in a happy one. And I have a dramatic instance of this from my novice years, how these mirror neurons work. We were having a formal meal in the dining hall, all the novices and all the lay guests. We were sitting at the tables with the food in front of us, and for no reason that I could discern, one of my fellow novices began snickering. It makes me laugh just to think about it. And then the person next to him began snickering. And before I knew it, there was nothing I could do, no matter how hard I tried. I was unable to stop myself from giggling too. So that's how that works. Meditation has been showing me that to complain is to argue with the very truth I've been seeking for all these years. So, what have I learned about how to practice with the complaining mind? And I found a few things that help. The first is acceptance. My master said countless times that all acceptance is the key that unlocks the gateless gate. It's such an important teaching that it's even carved on her tombstone, on the stupa out there. One of the direct inspirations for this talk was Great Master Dogen's commentary that I mentioned above on the precept, do not defame the three treasures, which includes the phrase, do not criticize, accept everything. That's a big order, isn't it? While thinking that of course I knew the meaning of acceptance, this time I looked it up in the dictionary, and definition number 3C hit the nail on the head, defining acceptance as the recognition that something is true. It isn't necessary to agree with or approve of that something in order to accept it as true. For instance, I don't need to believe that war is a good method for resolving disputes. However, it exists, and for that reason, I need to accept that it does. People are at war in various parts of the world as we speak. Another part of the definition of to accept is to endure without protest or reaction. And I noticed the phrase patient endurance in one of the invocations today. I can't remember which one, but it came up. Does this mean that it's necessarily wrong, for example, to participate in protests against violence or social injustice? I don't believe so, necessarily. However, in accordance with the Buddha's teaching, it is necessary to consider the consequences of our actions and to make wise decisions before acting. So, to endure without reaction leads to the next practice I've found helpful, sometimes described as patient endurance, patience. When we consult with doctors, we're called patients, and our problems are described in terms of complaints. For example, she complained of a headache. Sometimes doctors need to treat us in ways that cause pain in order to help us. In ordinary daily life, outside the clinic or hospital, circumstances can be painful, and we might think we can change those circumstances by complaining about them. Sometimes we can, okay, but we can't change the weather, for example. As an alternative to complaining, we can consider accepting conditions, recognizing them as true, and enduring them with patience. Just as the doctor's painful treatment can help us heal, adverse circumstances and difficult people can help us learn patience. In the words of the Indian master Shantideva, getting what I do not want and all that hinders my desire, in discontent my anger finds its fuel. From this it grows and beats me down. He goes on to say, dejection never brings me what I want. And in more elegant words, if you can do something about a problem, go ahead and do it. If not, there's no use being glum. Shantideva gives advice similar to that which I learned as a new meditator. Start small and work up. There we are. He says, there's nothing that does not grow light through habit and familiarity. Putting up with little cares, I'll train myself to bear with great adversity. So we can start small, putting up with the itchy eyebrow during meditation without scratching it, putting up with the person slurping at the table next to us, reminding ourselves that our suffering is due to past causes and is our responsibility rather than somebody or something else's. This attitude, instead of growing and beating me down, helps convert the suffering, bringing benefit to others as well as ourselves. And this is a choice we're able to make, right here and now, whenever we catch ourselves complaining and criticizing. Sometimes I find it helpful to recall my master's teaching that the universe isn't answerable to my personal will. It's going to be cold sometime. It's going to be cold during winter time, and sometimes during spring as well. And there's no use complaining about it. And this one's taking me lots of effort and practice. Equanimity is one of the 4 Brahma Viharas, or divine abodes. And this is another practice that can serve as a remedy for the complaining mind. Equanimity is a form of acceptance in which we relate to circumstances from the mind of meditation, neither grasping nor pushing away, thinking of neither right nor wrong, not complaining about them. The Buddha taught his monks to cultivate equanimity like this. When a sight, sound, flavor, touch, odor, or thought is understood as agreeable, disagreeable, or both agreeable and disagreeable, he said this type of understanding is conditioned, gross, dependently arisen. The response that is peaceful and sublime is equanimity. He goes on to say that whatever arises, whether agreeable, disagreeable, or both, ceases to be that way as quickly as the opening or closing of an eye when equanimity arises. And from my current point of understanding, I read this as saying that we're able to let go of our perceptions of agreeable, disagreeable, and so on by being willing to see things with equanimity. Complaining is an attempt to push away the disagreeable, and we're developing equanimity in the mind of meditation, neither grasping nor pushing away. This doesn't happen overnight, but it is an aspiration that we can cultivate. Great Master Dogen wrote, I've heard that it's the longest chapter in the Shobo Genzo. The title is Ceaseless Practice. It isn't easy, and we can do it just this moment, right now. Every now and then we can see progress, one of the beauties of our practice. A snake slithered across the path in front of me while I was walking in the North Woods the other day. Right here on our property, a snake. Those who have known me for some time may know I'm phobic about snakes, and I'm still working on that. I still avert my eyes when a snake appears in a movie, but not a squeak came out of me when I saw this little guy, which I recognized as harmless and allowed to go on its way. I'll just mention here that we do have discriminative thought for reasons as serious as survival. I do need to determine whether the animal in front of me is a rattlesnake or a pussycat so I can know how to respond to it. The last helpful practice I'll mention is contentment. Remember, a complaint is an expression of pain, grief, or discontent. Here's what the Buddha said about contentment. If you wish to be free from miseries and woes, look into contentment, which is synonymous with knowing what is enough. One might argue that contentment is a state of mind, not something we can voluntarily practice. However, I disagree. We can train ourselves to know what is enough. The Buddha taught that for monks, all that is needed is the 4 requisites: food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. We are fortunate to have these things and to live in a place where we are free to practice our faith. Those who aren't monks can still consider the 4 requisites as a reflection on knowing how much is enough. And this too requires a lot of practice. And we can do it right here and right now. Near the start of this talk, I mentioned taking a mid-morning break and perceiving that my drink wasn't the temperature I might have desired. I could have gone on with this complaint, embellished it, and thoroughly spoiled my break or even the whole day. But I made a different choice to be grateful for that warm drink. I find gratitude to be a helpful attitude when practicing contentment. And Reverend Master Oswin has been giving an excellent series of talks on gratitude. So I'll refer you to those, which are on our website, instead of going on about it here. There is always something to be grateful for. Try looking around and noticing how many things there are to be grateful for. And you can challenge yourself by finding ways to be grateful for things you perceive as disagreeable. After all, Many people love that snow, so it must have some fine qualities. When I came to Shasta Abbey, I was looking for something, wanting something. Reverend Master used to say that we start from greed. What I wanted was a peaceful heart. I wanted to stop making war on the truth. With time and much practice, I've been learning to make peace with myself and with the truth, with things as they are. Although I'm still of the opinion that war isn't a satisfactory way to resolve disputes, I've learned that I could be wrong. I've learned that my opinions are rooted in the judgmental mind, which is not the source of wise discernment.